The central research facility loomed before Dr. Eiley, its brutalist architecture differing greatly from typical Galaxian design sensibilities. Its massive concrete walls rose several stories high, devoid of the sweeping curves and delicate embellishments that characterized his species' usual aesthetic. The building's utilitarian design spoke to its serious purpose. This was where they conducted their most critical research, where they saw answers to their gravest threats, a threat that proved insurmountable until humanity did the impossible. Eiley's smooth emerald skin prickled in the facility's regulated atmosphere as he passed through the first security checkpoint. His elongated, fin-like ears, elegant structures that curved upwards from his hairless head, moved at the sound of air filtering machinery echoing through the corridors. The subtle ridges that extended from his forehead to his nape of his neck tensed with apprehension, a psychological response he couldn't fully suppress despite years of professional composure. Inside, the facility was filled with the synchronized operation of countless machines. Retrofuges whirred methodically in sealed chambers, while diagnostic equipment emitted steady electronic pulses. The air carried the sterile scent of disinfectant mixing with the metallic undertone of their medical instruments. Banks of monitors displaying cascading data, their soft blue glow reflecting off the polished floor and casting strange shadows across Ali's high cheekbones and deep-set silver eyes. He adjusted his high-collared medical coat, its dark grey fabric lined with a silver trim setting off the vibrant tone of his skin. The laid material draped elegantly around his tall frame, providing both protection and the ease of movement his profession demanded. Small diagnostic devices, secured in discreet pockets along his sleeves, offered reassuring weight. His thin, dark lips pressed together as he checked each instrument methodically, a habit born of years of medical practice. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. Kalini, their lead research scientist, emerged from an adjacent laboratory. Her own emerald complexion appeared pallid under the harsh laboratory lighting, and the natural regal bearing of her Gulzaxtian features, the high cheekbones and luminous silver eyes, seemed diminished by obvious exhaustion. Her thin dark lips were pressed into a grim line, and the ridges along her scalp seemed more pronounced, distorting slightly with each heartbeat, a clear sign of severe stress their species couldn't hide.
Dr. Eiley!
She greeted him, needle-like teeth briefly visible as she spoke, interlocking with unsettling precision.
Thank you for coming so quickly. We've made several disturbing discoveries.
Kalini guided him through a series of security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last. Through reinforced observation windows, Eiley glimpsed researchers in protective suits working at various stations. Their movements carried an urgency he hadn't seen before, even during previous health crises. The subtle shifts in their pointed ears and the tension visible in their neck ridges spoke volumes about their collective anxiety.
The parasite isn't natural,
Kalini stated bluntly as they entered her private laboratory.
We identified markers in its genetic structure that could only have been engineered. This was a deliberate attack.
Eiley's ears curved sharply upwards in alarm, the fin-like appendages slightly trembling. Engineered? By whom? She activated a holographic display showing a complex molecular structures rotating in the air between them. The blue light cast eerie shadows across their emerald skin, accentuating the signs of fatigue in their features.
We don't know, but the complexity of the design suggests advanced bioengineering capabilities. Whoever did this wanted to ensure maximum spread with a minimal chance of natural immunity.
Eiley studied the displayed data, his silver eyes reflecting the holographic light as his medical mind processed the implications. How bad is the infection rate?
97% in urban areas,
she replied, her voice tight, the natural knowing smile of their species completely absent from her face.
Rural communities show similar patterns, just delayed by their relative isolation. We're looking at potential species extinction within months.
The magnitude of the threat sent involuntary ripples through the ridges along Eiley's scalp. The Galactic Council
already made their decision.
Kalini's interruption carried bitter resignation.
They declared our world a forbidden territory. No aid, no contact, no hope of outside assistance. We're on our own.
She guided him to a containment unit where a sample of the parasite were visible through multiple layers of shielding. Its simple appearance belied its lethal nature.
It adapts faster than we can develop countermeasures. Every attempt at treatment failed. We've lost research teams in 3 facilities already.
Eiley watched the magnified parasite through the containment field, its subtle movements almost hypnotic. The natural silver luminescence of his eyes dimmed slightly as he processed the implications. Why bring me here, Kalini? What can a medical doctor offer that the research teams haven't already tried?
Because you have experience with unconventional approaches,
she replied, turning to face him directly, her elongated ears angled forwards, emphasizing her intensity.
And right now, unconventional might be all we have left. We need fresh perspectives, new ideas, anything that might give us an edge.
Moving to another station, Kalini activated a series of displays showing infection patterns across their major cities. The spread was comprehensive, methodical, almost beautiful in its terrible skill for contamination.
The pattern itself proves this was targeted. Natural outbreaks show chaos, randomness. This?
She gestured at the displays, her needle-like teeth glinting as she spoke.
This shows intent.
Eiley studied the data, his professional detachment wavering as he recognized locations where he had colleagues, friends, family. The ridges along his neck pulsed with suppressed emotion. How long do we have?
At current progression rates?
Kalini's voice was barely above a whisper.
3 months before societal collapse, maybe 6 before we face extinction. Unless... There are rumours,
she said carefully, her ears twitching subtly,
of a species that might be able to help. One that isn't bound by council decisions. One that has raised their middle finger to the council once, and then explained that the gesture was meant to offend them.
Her silver eyes met his.
Have you heard of the humans?
Word of humanity's response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Kalini's team transmitting their desperate findings into space, a lone ship appeared in high orbit, ignoring the Galactic Council's quarantine beacons. The vessel was small by interstellar standards, barely larger than a medical frigate, but its arrival sent ripples of hope through the Galaxian scientific community. Dr. Yavia, as the human introducing himself during the rush landing protocols, had been monitoring frequencies for signs of exactly this type of crisis. Earth, he explained, had been watching the Council's decision of abandonment with growing concern. 2 days after that conversation with Kalini about the humans, Eiley stood in the central medical facility, watching the human doctor move through crowds of infected Galaxians with shocking confidence. The speed of the response felt surreal, from desperate hypotheses to actual help in less than a standard cycle. Yet here was living proof of humanity's infamous disregard of bureaucratic barriers when lives were at stake. The facility's ancient stone walls rose around them, their pale grey surface a stark contrast to the pristine white floor beneath. Despite the overwhelming number of patients, the medical staff maintained immaculate cleanliness, a futile gesture of control in the face of chaos. Galaxians filled every available space, their normally vibrant emerald skin dulled to a sickly pale green. They lay on beds, sat against walls and huddled in corners. Some even occupied the wide stone staircase leading to the upper levels, their elongated ears drooping with fatigue. Dr. Yavia walked among them without any protective equipment, his bare human skin exposed to the air that had brought death to so many. His brown complexion and rounded ears marked him as utterly alien among the sea of green-skinned patients. Yet he moved with complete assurance. The human's confidence bordered on recklessness, but Eiley couldn't deny the implications of his immunity. "Your protective suits," Eiley said, his fin-like ears twitching with concern as he kept pace in his own sealed medical gear. "The protocols aren't necessary for me," Yavia said, kneeling beside a young Galaxian whose neck ridges were hot with fever. The human's hands moved gently as he examined the patient. "My species has a natural resistance to this particular parasite. Fascinating, really. It seems to target specifically Galaxian biology." Eiley watched as Yavia's fingers gently probed the patient's neck ridges, noting how the human had already learned the intricacies of their physiology. "That supports Kalini's findings about its engineered nature." The human nodded, his round eyes, so strange without their silver luminescence, focused intently on his work. "The precision of its genetic targeting is remarkable. Whoever designed this knew your species intimately." He moved to his next patient, careful and gently. "But they didn't account for a human immune system, so I'll be fine." They made their way through the crowded facility, Yavia stopping frequently to examine critical cases. The sound of laboured breathing and occasional whimpers echoed off the stone walls, creating a haunting chorus of suffering. Eiley's medical training helped him maintain composure, but the ridges along his neck couldn't help but contort in sympathy. "The Galactic Council's quarantine is technically still in effect," Eiley said, helping Javier lift a collapsed patient onto an empty bed. The patient's needle-like teeth chattered with fever. Their silver eyes dulled almost to grey. How did you get permission to come? Javier's laugh was sharp and brief. We didn't ask for permission. The council doesn't have authority over Earth, and we don't recognize their quarantine orders as legitimate. He checked the patient's vital signs with impressive efficiency. When we received your distress signal, we made our own assessment. The decision to help was unanimous. Moving through a particularly crowded corridor, they passed dozens of Galaxians slumped against the walls. Their high cheekbones and regal features, usually so striking, were drawn with pain. Some turned their elongated ears towards the human doctor as he passed, silver eyes tracking his movements with desperate hope. Your people took that risk for us? Eiley's voice caught slightly, his professional detachment cracking. Even knowing the council's position? Especially knowing their position. Javier's voice hardened. Abandoning an entire species to die? That's not a policy we're willing to accept. He paused to examine another patient, his hands gentle despite the steel in his voice. Earth has faced its share of pandemics. We know what it means to fight against extinction. They reached a temporary wall that had been set up in what was once a reception area. The elegant stone archways that had once welcomed visitors now watched over rows of makeshift beds. Medical equipment beeped everywhere, creating an irregular rhythm that matched the laboured breathing of the patients. How many medical ships did Earth send? Eiley asked, helping to adjust a monitoring device. Just mine. Javier didn't look up from his examination. We're not here on an official relief mission. Too much bureaucracy, too many delays. I have the equipment and expertise needed. That's enough to start. Eiley's ears curved in surprise. One ship? Against a planetary pandemic? Sometimes one is all you need. Javier straightened, his expression determined. What matters is using what you have effectively. I've already isolated several promising compounds that interacted with the parasite. With your help, we can begin the tests immediately. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Two medical assistants struggled with the new arrival, their protective suits hampering their movements as the patient thrashed in panic. Javier moved quickly, pushing through the crowd with Eiley close behind. The patient's silver eyes were wild, their needle-like teeth bared in delirium as fever wrecked their body. Without hesitation, Javier stepped forward, bare hands steadying the patient with surprising strength. The Galaxian's struggles weakened, then ceased as the human's calm confidence seemed to penetrate their panic. You see, Javier said quietly, helping the assistants move the now calm patient to a bed. Sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply showing up and refusing to give up. He turned to Eiley, his round eyes intense. Now, shall we get to work? After 2 hours of treating critical patients, Dr. Javier finally agreed to show Eiley his ship. They left the medical facility through its rear entrance, walking down corridors of ancient stone that gradually gave way to the natural architecture of their world. The evening air carried the sweet, musty scent of the surrounding mushroom forest, where massive fungal growths towered overhead like silent sentinels. Their bioluminescent caps cast a purple glow over the path, complementing the silver of Eiley's eyes as he followed the human through the gathering dusk. The short journey to the landing pad felt like crossing between worlds. Behind them lay the weight of their crisis, embodied in the overcrowded medical facility with its suffering patients. Ahead, stationed on a clear platform of polished stone, waited humanity's answer to their plight. The human ship's sleek form defied Galaxian aesthetic sensibilities. Where they favoured organic curves and soft materials, this human vessel presented clean lines and artificial precision. The hull was reflective, made of materials Eiley didn't recognise, somehow both metallic and fabric-like in appearance. The council's quarantine forced some interesting design choices. Javier explained as they approached, his hand pressed against a seamless panel, triggering a ramp that descended with barely a whisper. We needed something that could outmaneuver their patrol ships while carrying a full medical research lab. Carbon fiber composites and some creative engineering gave us both speed and space. Inside, the ship's corridors were a study in minimalist design. The walls, constructed from the same carbon fiber material, gently curved overhead, scattering screens providing illumination and information. Their soft blue glow reminiscent of the research facility's displays, but somehow more refined. Eiley's elongated ears moved at the near silence. The ambient noise of the air control pumps was so quiet it was barely registered. Your technology, Eiley observed, his neck ridges rippling with professional interest as they passed through another doorway. It's nothing like the council standards. Javier smiled, leading them deeper into the ship. Earth chooses a different path. While the Council standardizes their technology across member species, we kept experimenting. Sometimes the best solutions come from working outside established frameworks. The research lab occupied what seemed like an impossibly large space within the modest-sized vessel. Pristine workstations lined the walls, each equipped with equipment that Eiley both recognized and didn't. Familiar scientific principles expressed through their unfamiliar designs. Sealed storage units contained racks upon racks of sample vials, their contents glowing faintly through the glass. "This is where we'll develop the cure," Yevia said, activating a central console. A holographic display sprang to life, showing molecular structures floating in the air. Unlike the rough projections in Kailini's lab, these images possessed a clarity and detail that made Eiley's silver eyes widen. "I've already mapped the parasite's complete genetic structure. The resolution is good enough to show us exactly how it attacks Galaxian cells." Eiley moved closer to the display, his medical training helping him grasp the implications of what he saw. "The precision of your instruments. Even our best research facilities can't achieve this level of detail." "Different approaches to similar problems," Yevia replied, manipulating the display with quick gestures, his attention seemingly elsewhere. The molecular structure rotated, zoomed, and separated into its component parts. They spent the next hour reviewing Yevia's preliminary findings. The human's grasp of Galaxian biology impressed Eiley. He had already studied their species extensively before arriving. More impressive was the speed of which he adapted his understandings, incorporating new information as Eiley provided it. "Here," Yevia pointed to a particular molecular configuration. "The parasite attacked these protein structures in your cells. But look at the human equivalent." Another structure appeared alongside the first, similar enough to attract the parasite's attention, different enough to make us immune. "That's why we're naturally resilient." Eiley's ears curved forward with intense interest. "You've already isolated the mechanism?" The hard part was getting detailed scans of infected tissue. Once we had that, Yevia's hands reached for the controls, bringing up more detailed analysis. Moving to another workstation, Yevia revealed a series of cultivation chambers. Inside, tissue samples float in careful, regulated environments. "We're testing various approaches," he explained. "Direct genetic modification of your defense cells would be fastest, but the distribution would become a problem. I'm thinking something airborne might work better. A modified virus carrying the human protein sequences, transferring our immunity to your species." The complexity of the work was staggering, yet the human discussed it with casual confidence. Eiley found his initial skepticism fading, replaced by growing hope. The resources and expertise contained within the single ship exceeded anything he had expected. "How long?" he asked, watching another simulation cycle through on a nearby screen. "For a working prototype? I'm doing that right now." Yevi's expression turned serious. "The real challenge will be production and distribution. We'll need your people's help for that. Facilities, infrastructure, local medical knowledge. This has to be a partnership." Eiley's neck ridges pulsed with renewed purpose. "Whatever you need, our remaining research facilities are at your disposal. I can begin coordinating with other medical facilities immediately." "Good," Yevia nodded, already turning back to his work. "Because once we announce we have a cure, things are going to get complicated fast. People will be desperate for it. We need to be ready." The human's words proved almost prophetic sooner than either of them expected. As soon as they continued their discussion, a commotion was building outside the ship, the first ripples of a storm that would test both their species' resolve. The first warning came through the ship's external sensors. A rapid increase in thermal signatures gathered outside. Through the lab's monitoring screens, Eiley watched the crowd materialize from the shadows of the mushroom forest. Their silver eyes gleamed under the dim mushroom light outside. While their neck ridges tensed with emotion, some carried makeshift weapons, farming tools repurposed into crude implements of force. Most concerning were the children. Small groups of young Galaxians darted between the adults' legs, their emerald skin still vibrant with health, marking them as yet uninfected. They moved fast, testing the ship's perimeter, searching for ways inside. Their natural agility, usually a source of pride for their species, now served a desperate purpose.
"How could they already know you found the cure? No, they're here because they fear we'll leave them,"
Eiley explained, his ears drawing back with distress as he watched more civilians join the gathering.
"Like the council did. Like everyone did."
He recognized faces in the crowd, patients' families, medical staff from other facilities, ordinary citizens driven by terror and hope. Yevia studied the scene through the monitors. his weird contorting face set in grim determination. You need to address them directly. Show them we're committed to helping.
It's not that simple,
Eiley replied, noting how the crowd had already positioned itself to block the ship's departure vectors.
Our people have learned the hard lessons about trust recently. The Council's abandonment wasn't the first betrayal we've experienced during this crisis.
Moving to the ship's main hatch, they could hear the growing murmur of the crowd. Voices called out in their native tongue, some pleading, others demanding. The sound echoed off the stone landing pad, creating a cacophony of desperation.
Let me go first,
Ali said, adjusting his medical coat.
They know me. Trust me. I can...
A sharp clang interrupted him as something struck the ship's hull. The crowd's agitation was escalating. Fear overwhelmed reason. More impacts followed, though the advanced hull material seemed to shrug off the assault. Yavia stepped forward, reaching for the hatch controls.
Together,
he said, firmly. The hatch opened with a sudden clank. Immediate silence fell over the crowd as Eiley and Yavia emerged. The contrast between them was obvious. The Galaxian doctor in his formal medical attire, the human in his simple working clothes, both standing shoulder to shoulder.
We know you're afraid.
Eiley projected his voice, his silver eyes scanning the familiar faces before him.
We know you've lost faith in the promises of help, but this is different. Humanity came when no one else would.
How do we know they won't leave us too?
Someone shouted from the crowd.
The Council promised us protection before they abandoned us.
Yavia stepped forward, his bare hands raised to show his lack of protection. Look at me, he called out. No protective gear, no barriers. I breathe the same air as you. I touch your sick. I walk alongside your doctors. If I meant to leave, would I expose myself this way? A murmur ran through the crowd. Silver eyes studied the human with new intensity, noting the truth of his words. Your children, Yavia continued, gesturing to the young ones still trying to sneak closer to the door. They're clever, but we've already spotted them testing the ship's access points. They're afraid too. Afraid for their parents, their families. I understand that fear. Let me show you why it's unnecessary. Yavia tried his best, but just as it seemed he was making progress, the crowd erupted again. A coordinated barrage of impacts struck the hull, the sound reverberating through the ship's structure. The crowd had organized itself into groups, using their crude tool weapons as improvised battering rams against the access points. Eiley's sensitive ears picked up the distinctive ring of metal on metal. Someone was really determined to breach Yavia's ship. The human studied the security feeds, his expression hardening as he watched the mounting aggression. The human's earlier diplomatic demeanor gave way to cold calculation. He turned to Eiley, the screens behind him showing multiple breach attempts in progress. We can't reason with this mass panic. These people need a cure, not explanations. A makeshift projectile sailed between them, a piece of medical equipment Eiley recognized from his own facility, clattering against the hatch. Eiley's neck ridges pulsed with resignation as he watched the crowd surge forward, their silver eyes, usually so analytic, now ablaze with unreasoning fear. Back inside, Yavia ordered, his previous attempts at diplomacy forgotten. We'll finish the work airborne. The ship's lab is fully equipped for production once we finalize the formula. They retreated through the hatch, securing it just as the first wave reached the ship. The impacts of fists and improvised weapons created a desperate rhythm against the hull. Through the monitors, Eiley watched his people fear manifest into futile violence. Taking off won't hurt them, he asked, ears curved with concern. The thrust deflectors will keep them at a safe distance, Yavia replied, already moving towards the bridge. The engines roared to life, their gentle vibrations at odds with the chaos outside. As they lifted off, Eiley glimpsed the crowd dispersing, their makeshift weapons abandoned on the landing pad. Above the mushroom's forest canopy, the first hints of dawn painted the sky in shades of new possibilities. The ship's bridge offered a significant contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. Pristine displays cast their gentle glow across curved-controlled spaces, each screen tracking their ascent through the pre-dawn atmosphere. Yavia guided them higher with precise movements, the ship responding to his commands. Eiley watched through the main viewport as the last traces of purple bioluminescence from the mushroom forest faded beneath them as they returned to the lab. Back to work, Yavia announced, his eyes scanning the controls for something. The lab's gravitational compensation is active. We can continue our research without interruption. He gestured to one of the auxiliary seats, its cushioned surface adjusting automatically as Eiley settled into it.
The main computer is processing our latest test results. In the ship's laboratory, the earlier trials had generated volumes of data. Molecular structures rotated on multiple screens, each of them showing different aspects of the parasite's interaction with human protein sequences. Eiley's medical training helped him grasp the implications as Javier manipulated the displays. Here, the human indicated, zooming in on a particular molecular chain. Your people's research focused on attacking the parasite directly, but look what happens when we introduce modified protein markers. The simulation showed the parasite's reproductive cycle grinding to a halt. It's not about killing it. It's about making your cellular structure hostile to its replication. Eiley leaned forward, his silver eyes reflecting the cascading data. A biological deterrent rather than a direct attack. But delivering it. Already solved. Javier moved to a sealed chamber where a fine, blue powder filled several collection tubes. Engineered microparticles. They'll disperse through your atmosphere and bind with your population's respiratory mucosa. Once absorbed, they'll modify just enough cellular proteins to disrupt the parasite's reproductive cycle. The elegant simplicity of the solution struck Eiley, his neck ridges pulsing with growing excitement as he examined the powder's composition. This could work, but production and distribution. The ship's fabrication systems can synthesize enough for a city in hours. Javier was already programming the production sequence. We'll start with the major population centers. Use high altitude dispersal to maximize coverage. The particles are light enough to ride air currents, but heavy enough to eventually settle. A soft chime indicated the completion of another simulation. The results confirmed their theories. In virtual testing, the powder showed a 99.7% effectiveness rate. Eiley's ears curved forward as he processed the implications. How soon? He asked, watching the fabrication system begin their work. Javier checked the production metrics. First batch will be ready in 3 hours. We'll need authorization from your government for the dispersal. This medical ship can't survive a war with your species if they misunderstand our intentions. The Royal Palace. Eiley interrupted, his professional composure cracking slightly. We need to present this to the Emperor immediately. With his approval, we can do whatever we want. The human nodded, already adjusting their course. The ship banked smoothly, heading towards the capital. Through the viewport, the first true rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of promise. Below them, the sprawling mushroom forests gave way to the geometric patterns of urban development. They'll need proof, Javier said, setting the ship's autopilot. Empirical data, practical demonstrations. Most of your people are scientists. They'll want to verify everything. They'll also be desperate, Eiley replied, studying the latest batch of test results. But you're right. We should prepare a complete presentation. The Emperor's advisors will have questions. As they organized their findings, Eiley reflected on the elegance of the human solution. Where Galaxian science had thought to overwhelm the parasite with force, humanity had found a way to simply deny its reproduction. It was an approach that would have never occurred to its people, and perhaps that had been the point of the attack all along. The capital city was on the horizon, its ancient towers reaching towards the brightening sky. Somewhere below, the Emperor awaited their arrival, unaware that salvation came in the form of microscopic particles and human medicine. The capital's ancient towers drew closer as Javier guided the ship towards the designated diplomatic landing zone. Curved domes of weathered stone rose through the morning mist. Their surfaces in bed with the LED lights had faded because of the lack of power, another sign of their civilians struggling with the parasite crisis. The landing beacons, still working with emergency power, guided them to a platform jutting from the side of the royal palace itself. Dawn's light caught the bricks that adorned the palace walls, projecting dim reflections across the ship's viewport. Even in crisis, the palace maintained some dignity, though Eileen noted with concern the increased security presence around its perimeter. 3 separate security checkpoints awaited them before they could even enter the palace grounds. At each station, guards performed elaborate greeting rituals, touching their neck ridges in specific patterns while reciting traditional security phrases. Eiley reciprocated each gesture precisely, aware that any deviation from protocol would halt their progress.
Third hall requires proper introduction,
the chief security officer stated, her silver eyes fixed on Javier with barely concealed curiosity.
The human must be presented according to the ancient forms.
We don't have time for... Javier began, but Eiley touched his arm gently.
Trust me, Eiley whispered. Some traditions carry more weight than mere ceremony.
He turned to the officer, performing a complex gesture that marked him as a sponsor for an off-world dignitary.
Aye, Dr. Eiley, vouch for this human under the protocols of urgent necessity. The security officer's ears shifted in acknowledgement. After a moment's consideration, she touched her command panel. The door behind her opened.
Proceed, Dr. Eiley. The human is now recognized under your authority.
The palace interior revealed its subtle wealth through masterful restraint. Gemstone handles adorned doors of ancient wood, while hidden environmental systems maintained perfect comfort through the nearly invisible vents. The floor, polished to a mirror shine, was made of stone quarried from their world's sacred mountains. A carefully curated collection of furniture from across the galaxy lined the corridors, gifts from diplomatic missions spanning centuries. Their progress through the palace became a gauntlet for increasingly senior advisors, each requiring their own briefing, their own demonstration of the cure's potential. In a small antechamber lined with historical scientific achievements, they faced the Science Council. 5 of the most decorated researchers in Galaxian history sat in a precise semicircle, their neck ridges showing their unconcealed skepticism as Yavia began his demonstration. The council's leader, Professor Melira, whose work on cellular biology had once been considered groundbreaking, leaned forward with particular intensity.
Your proposed mechanism violates 3 established principles of xenobiological integration,
she stated, her needle-like teeth clicking in agitation.
The protein markers you described should trigger immediate rejection.
Yavia stood his ground, pulling up detailed molecular simulations on his portable display. With respect, Professor, those principles were established without accounting for human discoveries. Our immune systems are completely alien to our physiology. Another council member interrupted, his silver eyes flashing. The risk of secondary complications is negligible compared to certain extinction, Yavia countered, highlighting specific data points in his presentation. Look at the cellular response patterns. The modification is precise, targeted, and temporary. Your own research on protein synthesis, Professor Marilla, helped us refine the delivery mechanism. This caught their attention. As the council members studied the data more closely, their skepticism began to give way to cautious interest. Their ears curved forward in the subtle gesture of scientific curiosity that Eiley had seen countless times in research facilities. In another room, decorated with subtle patterns that seemed to shift in the light, the highest-ranked medical advisory demanded detailed production protocols.
The distribution methods seem unnecessarily complex,
one advisor argued, her elongated ears curved forward aggressively.
Our traditional delivery systems
have failed, Yavia interrupted, his patience wearing thin, but his diplomatic tone maintained. The parasite adapts too quickly to conventional treatments. This approach succeeds precisely because it's unexpected. When they finally got permission to enter the throne room, the space was packed with bodies. Advisors from every department crowded the modest chamber, their neck ridges betraying varying degrees of infection. The Emperor's throne, hewed from the same stone as the palace floor, made no attempt at ostentation. Instead, its design emphasizes functionality. Built-in diagnostic systems and communication arrays hidden beneath a surface that appeared deceptively simple. The Emperor himself looked exhausted, his emerald skin pale and his silver eyes dulled by endless crisis meetings. Yet his bearing remained regal, his neck ridges perfectly controlled as he studied the unlikely pair before him. You offer hope, the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of his species' survival. But we have seen hope turn to ash before. Convince me that humanity's solution is different. We've already synthesized the first batch, Yavia concluded, producing a sample of the blue powder. With your permission, we can begin distribution immediately. Every moment we delay costs lives, the Emperor finished. His silver eyes studied the sample intently. The Council of Elders will need to be consulted. Tradition demands. A young advisor, his neck ridges filled with pressure with nearly exploding emotion, stepped forward.
My Emperor, my entire district is infected. The death toll rises hourly. Perhaps just this once, tradition could yield to necessity?
The Emperor's ears shifted subtly, a gesture Eiley recognized as deep contemplation. The chamber held its breath, the crowd's tension obvious in the slight movements of their neck ridges, hoping for approval as they too had heard Yavia's explanation. Finally, the Emperor rose. The ancient forms exist to protect our people, he started, his voice carrying to every corner of the crowded room. But they cannot protect us from extinction. Begin your distribution, Dr. Yevia. You have my full authority. His silver eyes swept the chamber. Let it be recorded that, in our darkest hour, humanity stood with us until the very end, whether in success or failure. The next 3 days pass in a blur of incessant work. From the bridge of Yevia's ship, Eiley watched the first dispersal of the cure, a gentle blue mist that caught the morning light as it descended over the capital city. The humans stood beside him, both of them silent as they witnessed the beginning of their species' collaboration. Beautiful, isn't it? Yevia said, his hands free as the ship self-controlled. Through the viewport, they could see the powder settling like luminescent snow, a promise of their survival. The ship's sensors tracked its spread, confirming optimal dispersal patterns across the urban centre. But it was the scenes below that held their attention. Crowds of Galaxians emerging from buildings to watch the haze-like cascade, their silver eyes reflecting hope for the first time in months. They didn't need to track the cure's effectiveness through the data alone. On the next day, the change was visible in the medical facilities they visited. The sickly pale green of the infected skin began returning to its proper emerald hue. Neck ridges that had been contorted with pain relaxed into natural patterns. In ward after ward, patients who had been at death's door showed remarkable improvement. The central medical facility, where partnership had begun, proved the most profound transformation. The overcrowded corridors gradually emptied as recovered patients returned home. The stone staircase, once crowded with the suffering, now echoed with the sounds of medical staff celebrating each successful recovery. They are strong, Yevia observed as they watched another group of patients leave the facility. Most species would have collapsed under such pressure, or at least emptied every store of toilet paper. Eiley's ears curved in curiosity. What is toilet paper? Yevia just laughed, refusing to explain further. As days passed, city by city, region by region, the parasite lost its hold. The mushroom forests, which had seemed so ominous just days ago, now glowed with their natural bioluminescence under clear skies, their purple lights glowing strong, announcing their world's recovery. On the 10th day, they returned once more to the research facility where the journey had begun. Inside, they found Kalini in her laboratory, her emerald complexion restored to its fullest vibrancy.
The cure was effective,
she reported, her silver eyes bright with scientific excitement as she showed them her latest data.
The protection won't pass to the next generation, but now I have plenty of time to find a permanent solution.
Yevia studied her findings with obvious satisfaction. You'll have all the data soon. I'll make sure you can replicate the cure if needed. That evening, they stood on the ship's boarding ramp, watching the twin moons rise over the mushroom forest. The air was sweet with the scent of recovery. The Galactic Council will have to reconsider their position, Eiley said, his ears angled thoughtfully. This success proves how stupid they are for blocking help to our world.
Screw them!
Yevia replied. Earth doesn't need their approval to help those in need. He turned to face Eiley directly. This won't be the last time our species will work together. It's always good to have new friends. In the following days, the last traces of the parasite vanished from the world. Eiley often thought about the strange path that had led them to their salvation. The Council's abandonment, meant to isolate them, had instead connected them with humanity. The parasite, designed to destroy them, had ultimately made them stronger. When Yevia's ship finally prepared to depart, the landing pad was crowded once again, but this time with well-wishers rather than protesters. The Emperor himself came to bid farewell, presenting Yevia with a ceremonial gift. A crystal from the palace walls. Remember, Yevia said, as they made their final farewells. Earth stands ready to help, regardless of what the Council decrees. Eiley watched the human ship rise into the evening sky, his neck bridges moving with the calm certainty that this was not an ending. Above him, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the Earth's sun shone, home to the species that had rewritten the rules of galactic civilization to save his people. The future, he realized, would not be written in the Council's chambers, but in the countless possibilities that emerged when those who stepped up to help those in need.